Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good afternoon here at Autosport Live 2023. My name is Paul Cowland. I'm going to take you through a small half-hour forum this afternoon on the future of tuning and performance. Now, I don't profess to be an expert in anything, so I have surrounded myself with a wealth and a world of talent and knowledge here on this sofa. If I can just give you a quick introduction. Owen here, Sergeant Owen Messenger of the Devon and Cornwall Constabulary. Vision Zero. He's going to talk to us about the future of policing and road safety. Mark here, our resident insurance expert, is going to talk to us about all things cover. Nick from Tarox Brakes, Braking and Performance, and also one of the members of the Paaa, the Performance Automotive Aftermarket Association, a body that's looking to clean up and be responsible within the tuning industry. The YouTube and TikTok sensation that is George from George's Car Media, a man that is hitting now over 1 billion views on social media, a number that just blows my mind. And at the end, one of the founding fathers of the Paaa and the master of induction, Jonathan from ITG Filters. Gentlemen, welcome to our forum. We've got a lot to talk about in a very short space of time. Now, the tuning industry, I am very old. I'll put that out there. I'm going to be 50 years old this year. I was a boy racer over 30 years ago. And in those days, we used to modify our cars. We would put anything on them. We would put exhausts, and it was all about being as loud as we were, as fast as we could be, and we didn't really care about the consequences. But I mean, what you're trying to do with Vision Zero is give us some fun as youths and young car enthusiasts, but also just temper that with a little bit of legality and safety. So just explain what you're trying to do.
So I'm a little bit older than you. I was 50 last year, but in my youth I was exactly the same. I used to modify my cars. I was down at Southend every weekend, and I share that passion as well. So I kind of come at it from both sides of the fence. I've got that experience and that passion for modifying the cars, but also I see when it all goes wrong, and I'm responsible for reducing casualties on the road. So the project that we're doing is about that balance, and it's through engagement and education that we can reach people rather than giving tickets. The last thing we want to be doing is giving tickets, because it alienates us from the people we serve. But also nobody wants to get a ticket. So if we can do it through the education, using the Focus RS and using George's Car Media and getting those millions and millions of views and teaching people around the Fatal 5 and how to properly and safely modify your car, then it's better for everybody.
And this is the interesting thing to me, because obviously when we were kids, we were trying to do everything we could not to engage with the police, for obvious reasons, because most of the things on our cars weren't legitimate. Obviously that's changed. I want to point that out, Owen. I'm not doing that anymore. But obviously what's interesting about the content that you're producing together is the kids, the younger enthusiasts, are really engaging with it. And what's amazing just today, so you've built this Focus RS, which you've done using speed awareness money, which is fabulous. If you've had a speed awareness course in Devon and Cornwall over the last few weeks and months, I guess, you have inadvertently and brilliantly paid for the development of this Ford Focus, which is now being used to educate speeders, which I think is the most wonderful use of speed awareness money. But what's really impressing me is that this next generation of enthusiasts, the people that are the future of our industry, think what you're saying, that yeah, fit stuff, but make it safe, make it legal, they think that's great.
Yeah, it's far more popular than we ever kind of thought it would be. But just going back to your point about who pays for it, because I know that's contentious when we're starting to talk about speed and speed cameras. So if you get points and a fine from your ticket, we don't see any of that money at all. That goes into the government. But if you are if you're able to go on a course, then obviously we pay for the course to be put on, and we pay for you to go on that course, and any money that's left over at the end of it goes into a fund that is ring-fenced under legislation and can only be spent on road safety. So we're using some of that money for the RS project, and at the end of the project we will sell the car, and we will be able to give most of that, or probably a little bit more with the car than what it is, back into Vision Zero Southwest. So the project largely pays for itself. But one fatal on the road costs now £2.34 million. That's just one fatal, and there are 4 on average every day on the UK roads alone. So that's £10 million roughly every day being spent on fatal incidents on our roads. So if I spend £30,000 on a Focus RS, that really is a drop in the ocean if it saves one life, because it's saved us over £2 million. And that's kind of where the finances come from for the car. And yes, people are massively engaging with it, which is great.
I think it's a fabulous program, and we have a little place that in Devon. I think if I ever do get a speed awareness, that I will pay that with great pride now, knowing that you're going to spend it wisely. So moving on, Mark, obviously insurance is a very necessary part of our motoring lives, and the modified insurance isn't necessarily an easy thing to curate and underwrite. It's obviously a very moving feast with lots of very different parts. The industry is, I think, trying to grow up. We're trying to progress. We're trying to show people that we are a responsible body of manufacturers. From an insurance point of view, is that something you feel we need to do? And what are the things you're looking at? What are the difficulties you're facing as a specialist insurer that we need to help you with?
Yeah, it's. I think the understanding from the owner of the vehicle as to where their liability sits is important. So, just moving on from accidents on the road, insurers, when they look at a car that they want to, or a client would like to have insured, of course there's a value and that's their pride and joy and there's something to polish. But actually, that wriggly piece of tin is actually not necessarily the most prime concern for the insurer. It is the liability to injury to other people. And therefore what is prevalent a lot in the industry today is the fallout or the claims that come about injury to particular passengers who have been out in the car for a ride down the road, the driver's lost control, and unfortunately those young people, tends to be a lot of young people, find themselves in a wheelchair for the rest of their lives. And that claim could be literally millions. I've seen reserves on the books of £10 million plus for that type of loss. Now, for a £600 modified car policy, probably that's the best thing you could ever have purchased in your life. Because again, not many people know this, if you go out on the public road without insurance, and you have an accident that injures third parties, the system will come for you. And you will have to pay, whether it's your house or something else, if there is a bill that has to pay for the compensation to third parties, you're liable for that.
That's a big scary thought,
isn't
it?
It is a very scary thought.
And does it help? So obviously what the PAA are doing here at Autosport International is to create this quality standard. So they've launched the Smart Mark, and the Smart Mark, which stands for Safe Modification and Responsible Tuning, is a way of police, insurers, finance companies being able to look at the quality of a component or a series of components, and your underwriters can say, I know that's a good product. Well, does that help you when you're underwriting modified car policies going forward to know that these products exist?
It certainly does, because again, it's about safety and risk management. So if we know those parts have gone through the correct processes to make sure that they are fit for purpose, then that gives a lot of confidence to the underwriter, definitely. And it's part of a bigger package of consideration, because the underwriter is looking at the performance of the vehicle, the driver themselves, what the history is. Security is a big thing. Their use. So a lot of modified car insurers don't like commuting. It's not a great thing. If you've built a 50 grand modified car, we don't want you going to work in it. It's
high days and holidays, that's what you want to see, isn't it? Just fun use. And that takes me on to Nick, a man who I know has done a lot of fun use in his motor cars. And Nick and I have known each other an awfully long time. I think, Nick, like me, you're one of the old boy racers that's now grown up, bought a very nice jacket, and sees things as a father with a slightly different eye, I think, now. We're looking at the tuning world and the world of modified motor cars slightly differently now. I mean, do you think that's something that we've had to do for a long time? Do you think it's inevitable as we move into a more environmentally conscious world that sort of favours electric vehicles? Do you think as an industry we had to do this?
Yeah, I think there's outside factors that have happened. I think when the UK was in Europe, we were being pushed to follow the guidelines from Europe, and they were quite strict. And that's changed now, and there needs to be some kind of inward focus on making sure that we can look to insurance companies and the police and the government and say, no, we are looking after our own house. We are behaving ourselves, we are making products that are safe, and we are advising our customers to modify their cars in a responsible way. And I think that comes down to the people within our own industry. And like you said, a lot of the people within our industry started as young guys and girls modifying the cars with maybe not full awareness of the impact of that modification on the greater general public. And when you become a parent and you see or hear a car that comes past and it hasn't just got a sort of a rumble or a little pop here. It is continuously banging like the sound of a gun, and your children are scared of that car. That is not the positive impact you want to give your children about car modification. You want them to see sports cars and fast cars in a positive light, and they're being scared by how loud some cars have become. And I think we couldn't predict that because turbos have come back into fashion. We went through a period of time where turbos were being used all the time, and then throughout the 90s, they were just cars were NA, and now you've got this, through software and development, the ability to fundamentally change the car's performance and sound and more or less everything at the click of a button. And customers are allowed to go into a shop and be able to say, I want it to be pops and bangs, and that's what people are talking about, pops and bangs. And as enjoyable as it can be, and there's a place for it, but is the town centre on a Sunday afternoon the place to be letting your car overrun and bang and that's what's painting the industry. We've been painted as boy racers, as max power for a long time, and we want to sort of like appreciate that because it is who we are. But
it's
also,
our history, isn't it? We remember it well.
Yeah.
But do you think those
absolutely.
days are over? Do you think we're growing up as an industry, but also our user group, our next generation, which we're going to come to George in a moment and talk about? I think it's a very different set of people now, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've been talking about the fact that there might, in the next couple of years, just be a line drawn across the sort of the top of the industry and say 2024, everything past there may not be allowed to be modified. That's a potential that is on the play at the moment, and we as an industry might only be retrospective, which will be a real shame because as Tarox Brakes we get new cars and we want to develop new product for new cars that improve the customer's use of that car. With brakes, if a car is being driven hard or it's going on the track, we want to be able to offer the customer a product that is better than the OE product. But there is the potential, if the industry doesn't look after itself, that we will just get a line drawn that says anti-tampering. You're just not allowed to change anything on the car, whether it be the wheels, something as simple as the wheels, because they will, rather than go into depth with us about what works and what doesn't work, it's easier to just say nothing.
Yeah.
And that's
no
realistic
fun for any of us, is it?
No.
That makes every car boring. And George, coming to you, you've become something of a broadcasting phenomenon. So you've gone out, obviously, as a modifier yourself, to create a channel that shows people initially how not to do it, and then very quickly the correct and legal way to do it. So obviously you've made a lot of content with Owen, which has become literally viral sensations. So just explain to people here that may not know what the channel is, the kind of content you produce, and the reaction that you're getting from primarily a younger audience on what you're doing.
Wow, so where do we start? I think like most of the people in here, especially my age group, started off with a passion for cars, going to car meets, embarrassingly enough, McDonald's car parks, B&Q, the lot, every stereotype you can imagine. And the same way that I discussed yesterday, when you're on Amazon, you see products and you think, oh, that looks cool. We'd go to car meets and we'd see a screamer pipe, or we'd see a new set of wheels or a new spoiler, and the first thing I'd do when I got home is spoiler for a Focus ST, buy. But there was nothing in between my purchase of that and me and my friends fitting it that gave me an understanding of whether it was allowed, firstly, whether it was functional, whether it did anything, whether it was a good use of my money, as well as my mum, I'm sure, would have commented. And I just made videos that were popular to the car community for whatever reason. During lockdown, I got a knock on the door with this man and a colleague of his, I can't remember his name, and he just said, look, we've got a user group that's really struggling. We're really struggling to engage with them. And I don't want to say it was a cry for help, because it wasn't, because he could have done a lot of it on his own, but it was, look, I like your standard on the videos. I like the way you come across. I had other options, but let's do it. And we started some videos together, and yeah, never thought it would do as well as it did. And now, I mean, Owen, correct me if I'm wrong, we've probably got one of the most successful police road safety campaigns on social media ever, purely off the back of making some silly videos on our phones.
Yeah, it's from the policing side, it's the most successful social media campaign that the police have ever done. Road safety or not, it's just the most successful social media thing. And for me, it was when I was young, and I was young once. If I was modifying my car and I didn't know what I was doing, I would go and speak to somebody that I knew and trusted, knew how to do it, and we would do it properly. Sometimes, but
Sometimes.
well, hopefully
The
most
truth
of
is
the time.
coming out.
Edit that. But these days you've got social media. So rather than going and finding somebody like Martin from MJ Performance who helps us with our car, people will put on a social media group, can I cut the springs on my Clio? And I'm looking at it thinking, oh my God, no, because we know how dangerous that is. But you've got Facebook experts that will come on and say, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, just do it. You'll never get caught. But for us, a cut spring, as anyone here who's into modifying cars will know, is inherently dangerous and causes the collisions on the road that sees people dying. That means we go out and deal with it, and then we have to knock on the door to say that somebody's not coming home, not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. You'll never speak to them again because those springs that they cut have fallen out of the cups, and that car has gone into the field, and that person's rolled the car and died.
I think
and that's kind of where we were coming from with the project.
I think in summary, there has never been anywhere that young people can go and absorb the do's and don'ts in a manner that they actually want to hear it in. It's easy to say, well, the DirectGov website had it, but I'm 32, fairly switched on, and still find it confusing. And yet, how do the 17-year-olds even have a chance at knowing that their wheels were against some rule 4.651 section A? I mean, it's just so confusing, and that's where we've stepped in to.
And has it surprised you, George, the way that the younger enthusiast has embraced the chance to do it properly? Because that's what's really surprised me, because coming through a generation where we just didn't, the fact that this next generation, our future, really does want to do it properly, just fills me with hope. I think that's absolutely fabulous that, you know, these are the guys that want to buy the proper gear that works, that won't cause, because we just didn't care. Don't you think that's brilliant?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that would say, well, that we just can't afford to do it properly. The same way that a lot of people would say, well, I can't afford to eat healthily.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, it's cheaper to eat healthily, and it's probably cheaper to modify it correctly than it is to do it illegally.
It's cheaper than crashing, isn't it, always? Everything's cheaper than crashing.
It might be cheaper right now to buy a decal off someone on Facebook and fit it, but in the long run, getting stopped by Owen, and then potentially being in a crash, turning out you avoid of MOT and insurance, and then, as you said, you know, you've crashed into someone, you're then paying all that compensation and so on and so forth, all the money to them and so on. It's cheaper just to do it properly the first time and just listen to our videos, hopefully.
Yeah,
and,
very wise
be
words.
sensible.
Very wise words. Now, Jonathan, we'll come to you finally. We had Carl McCartney, MP for Lincolnshire, here yesterday. He's also been a member of the Transport Select Committee. He was, I think, very enthused about a very similar panel we had yesterday talking about this new era of responsibility, a new era of legality and the way we're going. You're somebody that sits with legislators and has done a lot of hard work behind the scenes to help us with the way we're going. What do you think of how the future looks for tuning and performance?
Well, yes, I think I mean, tuning may be very affected by the legislation about electric cars and so forth, but as long as we're still working with hybrids or, you know, conventional cars, we've got to be a bit more responsible than we were in the past, if you like. I mean, the vast majority of our members' products are well engineered, and if they're well engineered, they ultimately are cheaper than buying the cheaper part, because, you know, okay, you might have an accident, but even if you don't do that, the poorly made part will break and need replacement, whereas a well-made part will last a long time. So what we're trying to do with our SMART campaign is to encourage the tuning industry to sort of come into that central area where you know, stuff is done to a high standard. And I mean, it's true, very often, you know, a good set of aftermarket brakes, such as Tarox might make, will make the car safer in many ways because they're more powerful brakes. And even a lot of engine tuning doesn't really negatively affect emissions performance. You know, and as Nick's told us about popping and banging, you know, that kind of thing's terrible for the catalysts if they're still fit.
It's true. All right, Dad. All right, Dad.
Yeah. But the point is that if we can bring that sort of encouragement and get the industry so that most of it is producing really responsibly made products, then tuning can be done
without us being too worried about it. And then the whole business of legislation can be kept as a sort of light touch. The great danger is if there's a lot of horror stories about tuning, that some people will say, oh, God, blimey, we need to ban that, because it can't be safe. And we know as engineers that it is safe. What we offer, in some of our companies, is safe and works with emissions and all that. So we're trying to pull that as a campaign to get people to understand that that's hugely important. And the kind of thing George's been doing with Owen is just brilliant, because it's a help. We can feed into that, and hopefully many people will feel that need to safe modification and responsible tuning.
It's the future. And do you feel it's a case of we need to almost regulate and legislate ourselves and put our own house in order? Because speaking to Carl yesterday with his great experience of government legislation, he says if you do it and do it properly, kind of almost you're creating the need for us not to have to.
Yeah. It certainly makes my job a lot easier to do, because I've spent a lot of time talking to civil servants and politicians about the wording of legislation to try to keep it so that it doesn't damage our industry for obvious reasons. But we can't go into a meeting with a politician and say, oh no, we want it to be unsafe. We need to be promoting that. So yeah, if we can make it that the UK performance industry is seen as a responsible industry led by a body that can, whether we can police it as such within our industry is one matter, because you've got to have authority. But if we can really make it important that people buy into the PAA's message, then that will hugely reduce the amount of dangerous modification that might be going on at the fringes.
Yeah, very wise. Now, we've got probably a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to throw over to our law enforcer and our insurer just for, I think, a final word. If you're giving some advice, anybody watching this film or sitting here listening today, I mean, what should they be doing? What have they been doing wrong in the past? What should they do correctly going forward?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say watch our videos. I mean, what it is we are trying to make less confusing the very confusing legislation that's out there. And construction and use, what we use, was written in, I think it was 1984. It needs updating, but also it doesn't necessarily align with the MOT test, which is what creates more confusion. So what we're trying to do on the videos is just make it a little bit more easy to understand. And we're trying to answer as many of the common questions as we can, and then we use the RS as well to show you how to do this stuff properly, so that you don't get tickets from us and we can deploy our resources elsewhere to people that need us more. So yeah.
Thank you, and do check the channel out. It's absolutely fabulous. Even I've learned something from it. George's Car Media on YouTube and TikTok is a phenomenon. And Mark, I'll give you the final word. Obviously, there is this ignorance among many drivers that says, oh yeah, I can just say to my insurance company, it always had that on when I got it. Ignorance of the law is no excuse to the law, I know that. So if you had a final word to anyone thinking of insuring a car, what would you say?
The key thing is obviously to be absolutely honest with yourself and what you've got. And if I can just say, what I've heard today is music to my ears. Because in my world, I'm from the motorsport background, and my passion was rally cars, not modified cars, but the same thing. I tinkered for hours and still do with a little 205 GTI in my garage, tweaking it to make sure I get the best out of it. I think education is key here for everybody, because people look at insurers and go, God, they're ripping me off again. But as I've said, when you're buying your even £1,000 motor policy, you're getting unlimited third-party insurance cover. And when you think about it in real terms, that's a really good, cost-effective product to buy. But yeah, education's key. Fantastic work, guys. Keep it up.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think that's a perfect point to wrap up. You have one more point, Owen.
Last point I'd like to make, if I may, is our project is entitled Race the Track, Not the Road. And I think that's a really important point to put across, is that there is a time and a place. And more things go wrong through the manner of driving than through the modifications. And I'm sure insurance will back me up on that as well. We are more than happy, certainly in Devon and Cornwall, to support car meets and the industry, but we rely on people to make that work as well. and the industry and the car community needs to come together to make sure that the poor behaviour in the wrong place doesn't happen, because that's when things get shut down.
That's a great point to leave it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Owen, Mark, Nick, George, and Jonathan, thank you very much. I think that is the future of tuning, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.